Russia has ordered a 5-hour humanitarian pause in the Syrian rebel-held enclave of eastern Ghouta near Damascus. The truce has been set up to allow civilians to leave eastern Ghouta after an 8-day surge of government bombardment has killed more than 500 people, including more than 120 children, according to reports. However, human rights workers claim that while there has been no violence in Ghouta, there have been no immediate signs of any corridors set up for people to use. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said calm had generally prevailed in eastern Ghouta overnight, though 4 rockets had hit the nearby town of Douma in the morning before the 5-hour window began at 9 a.m. local time, 7 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. The Russian Defense Ministry said on Monday the measures, decided in agreement with Syrian forces, were intended to help civilians leave and to evacuate the sick and wounded, but the spokesman for Filak al-Rahman, one of the main rebel groups in the eastern Ghouta, accused Russia of presenting people with the choice of forced displacement or being killed in bombardment and siege, and called this a Russian crime. A spokesperson for the International Red Cross said that in order for a humanitarian corridor to work, it needs to be well planned and implemented with the consent of all parties in the conflict. The 5-hour respite announced by the Syrian government's Russian ally is nowhere near the month-long ceasefire ordered by the UN this weekend. After days of diplomatic wrangling, the United Nations Security Council on Saturday adopted a resolution calling for a 30-day ceasefire in Syria without delay, to allow for aid deliveries and medical evacuations. Eastern Ghouta is a rebel stronghold on the edge of the capital Damascus, which has been outside government control since 2012 and is thought to be home to some 400,000 civilians. It is held by a mishmash of rebel and jihadist factions since the near-total collapse of the Islamic State group's once sprawling caliphate. Damascus has looked bent on completing its reconquest and eastern Ghouta is a key target. The regime intensified its air campaign there early this month with devastating results. The United Nations estimates 3/4 of private housing has been damaged. Much of the population has moved underground, with families pitching tents in basements and venturing out only to assess damage to their property and buy food, a trip that frequently turns deadly amid the falling shells and bombs. Residents trapped in the wreckage of their own homes have bled to death as even rescuers were targeted. At least 22 civilians, including 7 children, were killed in new raids and artillery fire by the regime, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights War Monitor said Monday. On Sunday, a child died and 13 others suffered breathing difficulties and showed symptoms consistent with a chlorine attack after a regime air raid struck the town of Al-Shifuniya, the observatory and a medic said. Russia dismissed reports of a chemical attack as bogus stories. The Syrian government has repeatedly denied using chemical weapons, a stance repeatedly supported by Moscow, but Union investigators say government forces used chlorine as a weapon at least 3 times between 2014 and 2015, as well as a sarin gas attack in 2016. In November, Russia used its veto power twice to block the renewal of a UN investigative panel tasked with identifying those responsible for the deadly gas attacks. The Syrian war, which is approaching its 8th year, has killed hundreds of thousands of people and driven half of the country's pre-war population of 23 million people from their homes.
Tell me where the freak's at.